This video is going to look at Germany 1919 to 39 and focus on key figures, important people that come up on that Germany topic between those years. That it's worth you knowing their names, who they were, what they did and why they're important. So you can either take notes based on the slides or you can just listen to the information that I'm giving you. Right, let's get started. So the first key person, important person for the Germany paper is Gustav Stresemann. Gustav Stresemann was the Chancellor of Germany in 1923, which was the second most important job you could have in the Weimar government. It's like our version of the Prime Minister. But he's only Chancellor for a very short period of time, but he is in the government for 1923 to 29 until he dies as Foreign Secretary, which means he'd be dealing with other countries. So what did he manage to do? You can break Gustav Stresemann's achievements into two groups. He helped Germany recover from hyperinflation, so he helped the German economy, and then he built up relationship between Germany and the rest of the world, so he helped Germany's reputation. He helps the economy by introducing a new currency as Chancellor in 1923, a temporary currency called the Rentenmark, which had more value to it than the mark had. It was valued against property. So that means that the economy begins to get more stable. It begins to come under control and people start to use money again. He also negotiates the Dawes and Young Plan, which are two plans that are to do with the reparation payments that Germany have to give to France after World War I. And he manages to shrink the amount they have to pay overall, and he manages to extend it. So they have more time and they have to pay less back. And that helps the economy calm down as well. He also gets loans off America. So he borrows money from America to help pay France back. By signing the Locarno Pact, which he signed with around 30 other countries, they all agreed that they would keep their existing borders. So whatever country they had at the moment, they were going to keep it at that size. That built a relationship up because all these countries that shared borders with one another no longer had to be afraid that they would go to war and one would try and overtake the other. And he also negotiated Germany, to join the League of Nations, which was really important because they'd been banned from the League of Nations under the Treaty of Versailles. Now, by joining it, Germany can now start to have conversations with the rest of the world. They can start to talk things out, but also it's more of a status symbol. So by joining in that fold, that elite group, it shows that Germany are now an important country again, which was really important after World War I. So why is he important? He brought a golden age to Germany. They call it a golden age because in the late part of the 1920s, so 23 to 29, everything is getting better in Germany. Their economy is starting to make money again. They're starting to be friends with countries that they'd ostracised and fallen out with after World War I. And that means that Germany can now start to focus on improving itself. So it starts to get quite famous in terms of cinema. So 1920s German cinema is quite popular. Art begins to thrive, and social rights, so for example women's rights, begin to improve. Women get the vote, they go to work, their fashions change, they're allowed to go out on their own. It's a general golden age in terms of everything under the work of Stresemann. Now, of course, in 1929 Gustav Stresemann dies. In that very same year, the Wall Street crash happens in America, which triggers the Great Depression, not only in America but around the world. And that's when things go downhill again for Germany. You've got mass unemployment, which of course Hitler takes advantage of. He promises work and bread, and that's kind of what people latch on to, and that's how he becomes popular. So Stresemann is kind of the last saving grace of Germany, really. Next important person is President Hindenburg. He has been president of Germany from 1925 to 34 when he dies. He's ex-army, so people were quite fond of Hindenburg. He was quite tough, and it was his job to, as president, to choose who would be the Chancellor of Germany. He chooses Adolf Hitler in 1933. He doesn't want to choose Hitler. He doesn't like Hitler. He is worried about Hitler's anti-Jewish policy. He doesn't feel like he's got enough experience as a leader. He thinks he's a bit of an upstart wannabe who loves power. But Hitler wins the election in 1932, which means he has the majority in the Reichstag, which means he's popular. So really the president has to choose the most popular candidate. However, President Hindenburg does refuse Hitler quite a few times, but eventually in 1933 he gives in. Why is President Hindenburg important? Because he gives Hitler that really important job as Chancellor of Germany, which starts to give Hitler the power he needs to become Führer. Now, in 1934, the Reichstag fire happens. The Reichstag building is set on fire. Hitler asks President Hindenburg to use that to trigger Article 48, which is when the president gets all the power for himself so that he can make quick decisions. Now, what is happening at the time is President Hindenburg has had a long-term illness and he's actually not really in Berlin serving as president at the time, but Hitler asks him to trigger this and he says, I will take over for you and I will make big decisions. So he does, and Hitler makes decisions like banning all other political parties, and eventually he kind of ends up taking all the power for himself. Now in 1934, President Hindenburg dies a few months after the Reichstag fire. And what Hitler does is he says, because he's been given those emergency powers, he says, we're not going to have another president, we're not going to have another election. In fact, I'm going to take over as the ultimate leader of Germany and I'm going to name myself the Führer. And that's how Germany turns into a dictatorship. So you could say it's because of President Hindenburg that Hitler has the power to do that in the first place. Von Papen is another person that you may name, that you may see popping up on Hitler's journey to power. He's ex-army too. He was Chancellor of Germany in 1932 and then Vice-Chancellor from 33 to 34. Now he's got a connection to Hitler. He was Chancellor of Germany in 1932, but he didn't have the majority of the Reichstag, which means he couldn't pass bills, make laws or big decisions. So President Hindenburg has the power to choose who stays and who goes as Chancellor. So he tells von Papen to pack his bags and he dismisses him. Now von Papen likes power, he wants to remain in government. So he goes to Hitler, who has won the election in 1932, but remember President Hindenburg didn't want to make him Chancellor. He goes to Hitler and he says, maybe we could work out a deal. Hindenburg still listens to me, so if I can go to Hindenburg and say, look, me and Hitler are in on this together, how about you make Hitler Chancellor and me Vice-Chancellor? I'm sure I could persuade him to agree. And Hitler says, yeah, okay, go for it, see if you can get me to be Chancellor. Von Papen goes to President Hindenburg and says, I know you don't like Hitler, but if you make me Vice-Chancellor, I promise you I can control Hitler. So then we'll have the majority of the Reichstag and we'll be able to tell Hitler what to do. Of course, they underestimate Hitler and nobody can tell Hitler what to do. So Hindenburg agrees and he makes Hitler Chancellor and von Papen Vice-Chancellor. After Hindenburg's death, Hitler makes sure that all his enemies are gone with the Night of the Long Knives, which is where they make a list of all of Hitler's enemies, including key members of the SA, and they murder them. Von Papen manages to get out of that. He doesn't get arrested, he doesn't get murdered, but he kind of quietly slips away and he leaves the government in 1934 after the Night of the Long Knives. So he's important because he helps get Hitler into that position of power, and then you hear from him again. Okay, here's one that you may recognise a bit more, Joseph Goebbels. He's a close friend of Hitler. He joined the Nazi Party early on in 1924. And he was made propaganda minister when Hitler became the leader of Germany in 1933, which means he's in charge of propaganda, he's in charge of Hitler's image, and he's in charge of getting Hitler into power and keeping him there through things like speeches, posters, film. So he helps Hitler win that 1932 election. Ever since he joined the party in 1924, he kind of takes over. He organises rallies, he designs posters, he comes up with the famous work and bread phrase that they promise everybody because that's what people want in 1920, after 1929 in Germany. And that basically helps Hitler win the 1932 election. Once they're in power, he then establishes that Nazi policy through propaganda posters and films again. So for example, the Nazi policy that women should have the traditional role of being at home and wives and mothers, the pro-Aryan policy, the anti-Jewish policy. So you get a lot of propaganda posters where the Jews look bad. You get a lot of films where the Aryans are prominent, blonde-haired, blue-eyed young men and women. So he's important because he basically brainwashes everybody into supporting Hitler. Because of the anti-Jewish policy that he promotes, he helps start the Holocaust. The Holocaust is only allowed to happen by the German people because they've been brainwashed into thinking that Jews are bad and they need to be rid of Jews in Jewish-occupied countries. And he helps establish Hitler's famous image as the Führer, the saviour of Germany. So he's a very key figure in the Germany topic. Here's another one, Ernst Rohm. Ernst Rohm joined the Nazi Party when it began in 1919, so at the very start. So he was very loyal to Hitler. He ended up becoming leader of the SA. The SA were the paramilitary side of the Nazi Party. They were kind of like the Nazis Party's private army. And he was the leader of them. He's a close friend of Hitler. They've known each other for many years. He was also a socialist, which meant he believed in kind of narrowing the gap between the upper and the lower classes and making things more equal for everybody. What did he do? As leader of the SA, he helped get Hitler into power, mainly through intimidation. So the SA would go around beating up communists who were their greatest rivals, kind of pushing people into voting for Hitler and doing Hitler's bidding. So they had a big role to play during the Munich Putsch in 1923. However, he became too big a threat to Hitler once Hitler got into power in 1933. So in 1934, he was arrested at the Night of the Long Knives and then shot in his jail cell the next day, which shows that Hitler could turn even on his closest friends. He's important because he shows the unlawful way that Hitler came to power. Hitler murdered people who hadn't done anything wrong, in Hitler's opinion. And he was important because he was a genuine threat to Hitler. The SA were millions strong in the 1930s. He had so many people under his control, and he was annoyed that Hitler wasn't doing any of the socialist promises that he had originally said that he would do. And Hitler was worried that if Ernst Rohm wanted to take over Hitler, he had all of the SA on his side. So theoretically, he could have taken Hitler's power from him. So during the Night of the Long Knives, he has key members of the SA shot or arrested. The rest of the SA get turned into the SS, and they have to be very loyal to Hitler. So Hitler kind of turns it into his favour in the end, but he sacrifices Rohm's life in order to do that. Heinrich Himmler is another key figure. He's a former soldier in the German army. He joins the Nazi Party early on in 1923 and ends up becoming the leader of the SS and the German police in general. So what did he do? He got rid of the SA during the Night of the Long Knives that I just mentioned to you with Ernst Rohm. So he was one of the people that drew up the list of all of Hitler's enemies and sent members of the SS out to arrest and shoot people on that list. He forms the SS, which are Hitler's secret police, so to speak. And in the SS, you have, the famous black uniform. Members of the SS would be called the Gestapo, and they were the secret police behind the SS. So they would go in and kind of arrest people without warning and then take them away to concentration camps, and then you would never see them again. The SS are also the soldiers in the concentration camps, which means that Heinrich Himmler is in charge of all concentration camps in Germany and Poland, which means he helps organise the final solution, which is the extermination of the Jewish race, amongst other people. So he's important because he helps Hitler rule mainly through fear. If Goebbels helps Hitler rule through brainwashing and propaganda, Heinrich helps him rule through fear and intimidation. People are afraid that the SS or the Gestapo will arrest them in the middle of the night if they go against Hitler in any way, and they will never be seen again. He's also famous for his target of the Jewish race, so he's one of the key figures of the Holocaust. And finally, Herman Goering. Herman Goering was a former soldier as well, joined the Nazi Party early on, and ends up being in charge of the army and the Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force. He was injured during the Munich Putsch, which shows his loyalty. You may notice that a lot of these key figures joined the Nazi Party early and had some part to play during the Munich Putsch in 1923. So Hitler likes to reward loyalty amongst his friends, and he gives them really important jobs. Hermann Goering establishes the Gestapo. He helps set it up, and then he passes it on to Heinrich Himmler and other members of the SS to run. His key role is Germany needs to prepare for war. Most of the world don't know it yet, but Hitler has a long-term goal. He wants to take over as many countries as he can, and that is going to lead to World War II. And Hitler knows it will lead to a war. So he wants Germany to be ready. So it's Goering's job to make sure that the economy has prepared for the war, that they are building things like weapons and tanks. Men are trained. He starts to build up the army. And without people really knowing it, Germany becomes one of the most powerful armies in the world, prepared to fight a war, which in 1939, of course, they do, and very successfully for a few years. He's important because he's the second most powerful man in Germany, and he helps build up the army and economy to prepare for war. So there you have it. There are your key figures. I would watch this video as many times as you can in order to get these names and what they did and why they're important into your head. It might also be good if you can recognise their picture, because as we know, the Germany paper is mainly source questions. So happy revising, and I hope this video helps.